You know, when I decided it was time to come out of the closet many years ago, they were the most important people for me to go talk to, Rob and Michelle Reiner. They are family to me. Rob is a mentor, a father figure, a best friend. And I went to their house, and I was so nervous. I was shaking, I was trembling. Perhaps a few of you have gone through that in your own lives. And I went into their house, and I was seated in the living room across from Rob and Michelle, and I will never forget this big, fluffy couch that I sort of sunk in. And I said, they thought I was there to talk about something work-related, and I said, you know, I want to tell you that I'm gay. And they both looked at me, and Rob said, yeah, we know that. Are you dating anyone? And I tell that because since that day, all the way leading up to this case, Rob and Michelle Reiner have been amongst the single greatest great allies we have in this country. And so please join me again in thanking Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle. It is so great to be home in Los Angeles. You know, my friends, there are just 3 days left until the challenge to Proposition 8, a case that was born right here in Los Angeles, is heard by the 9 justices of the United States Supreme Court. But that fight for equality in L.A. didn't begin with Prop 8. Let me take you back a bit. This city has always been at the forefront of this civil rights movement. In fact, the oldest LGBT advocacy organization, the Mattachine Society, was founded here in 1950, nearly 2 decades before Stonewall. The newspaper that became The Advocate and the Metropolitan Community Church were founded right here too. But most of all, LA is one of the earliest places that LGBT people and our allies marched in the streets for equality. On New Year's Eve in 1966, a group gathered in a bar in Silver Lake called the Black Cat. Some of you have been there. Was it then, or is it the new one? They gathered there at their own risk. They knew it was unsafe and unlawful for people like them to even assemble. And the folks at the Black Cat that evening were hopeful that they had finally found their sanctuary. And when the clock struck midnight, balloons dropped from the ceiling, and the patrons there cheered and they kissed to ring in the new year of 1967. And at that very moment, undercover, plainclothes police officers began to strike everyone within reach. They used their fists, they used clubs, they even used pool cues. The beatings were so violent that one victim was hospitalized for days due to a ruptured spleen, and more than a dozen were arrested, handcuffed, and taken away by the police. 2 of the men, in fact, appealed their arrest all the way to the Supreme Court, and their case was never heard. Even at that seemingly hopeless moment, nearly 50 years ago, when there were no friends in Congress, no welcoming churches, and certainly no justice in our courts, the people of the Black Cat, our community here in Los Angeles, they took to the streets to protest by the hundreds. 50 years later, that spirit of protest is still with us. And when Proposition 8 passed by the narrowest of margins in 2008, here in Los Angeles and around this state, we took to the streets once again. But this time, tens of thousands of us marched. And we marched from the churches that funded hate to the businesses that supported discrimination, to the halls of government that now turned away gay and lesbian couples simply seeking the right to marry the person they love. It was a chaotic and painful moment. But as protests spread across this country, we learned that we were alone no more. Overnight, Proposition 8 had become a symbol of injustice, not just here in California, but around the country and even the world. And when the LA Times asked the chief strategist of the Yes on 8 campaign what he thought about the anger in the streets, he said, "They can protest all they like. It doesn't change the fact that Proposition 8 has passed and the election is over." 4 years later, he couldn't have been more wrong, because out of that moment of protest, two California couples stepped forward to channel that protest into action. They took Proposition 8 to federal court with the bipartisan legal dream team of Ted Olson and David Boies at their side. And in the process, these two couples have come to represent all of us. Kris, Kerry, and Sandy Stier have been together for nearly a decade now. Long enough to raise 4 incredible boys. In May of 2009, they walked arm in arm up the stairs and into the Alameda County Clerk's office, seeking to have their relationship recognized as full and legal marriage. They were turned away, not because the clerk wanted to, but because he was required to by California's Proposition 8. In that same week, right here in Los Angeles County, Paul Katami and Jeff Zarrillo faced that very same ordeal. After more than 8 years together, Paul and Jeff faced an irrational and unconstitutional obstacle in their paths to marriage. Kris and Sandy, Paul and Jeff, in just 3 days, they'll have their day in court, the United States Supreme Court. And when those couples walk up those stone stairs between those grand columns and into that marble courtroom, an imposing and curtained chamber that has defined justice for centuries, the weight of history will be on their shoulders. But thanks to President Obama, they will shoulder it alone no more. You see, by filing that historic brief in support of this case and those plaintiffs, President Obama and the entire United States government have joined us in this fight for the very first time. So on Tuesday, when all rise and those 9 robed justices take their seats in the front of that courtroom, next to those 4 plaintiffs will be the full force of the United States government, whose position is now, and I quote to you, Proposition 8, by depriving same-sex couples of the right to marry, denies them the dignity, respect, and stature of opposite-sex couples. It thereby denies them equal protection under the law. This is a moment that the patrons of the Black Cat could have never imagined. Yet it is in every way a testament of their will to fight nearly 5 decades ago. We have come so far since then, and we stand on their shoulders today. Their progress